Thanks everybody for joining. Like Mitz was saying, this is a fascinating story for us, and I'm really anxious to hear uh, everything about it. And so excited to be here. And thanks everybody for joining. Leah?
Why is it so fascinating? We're kind of caught off
Yeah,
guard. I mean, you just do it and all of a sudden, it's gone crazy. So
yeah.
what is it that resonates?
Well, that's a
Me?
great question, Janice and Ronald. I really appreciate you guys being here today. My name is Leo, and I really appreciate you taking our call and our invitation to be here today. So ultimately, when your story was highlighted, I think the first time that I heard about it was from my wife, who mentioned an NPR article, and I hadn't seen that article, and that was probably a couple weeks before the Los Angeles Times article, which I did see. And in answer to your question, I'd love to, I think you kind of answered the first question that I had for you in terms of why do you think people are so captivated by the story? Then I'll open it up to the audience. But for me personally, hearing this, we're saturated with bad news all the time in terms of a 24/7 news cycle, wars here and there and everywhere. There's just a lot of negativity in the world. And to see a story where we hark upon bygone eras where there was unfortunately prejudice, racism, um, much more so than today. And having a family endure through that and build bridges and build relationships through that, and then come full circle later on, generation later, in terms of saying, hey, this was something that we really appreciate. We're in a better position now, and now we love to give back. And I think that giving back, it's also giving forward because you're giving to people that you've never met before. I think that's what really captivated me personally in terms of hearing about your story and hearing about the wonderful generosity that your family has given to the community of San Diego and also to the entire nation, right? Because I think it'll have ripple effects throughout.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Because it's kind of caught us totally off guard. You just do these things and it seemed right. And then all of a sudden there's like, oh my gosh.
Well, we are both retired school teachers, and education has been very important to our whole being. And so, what we can do, we have been doing. We have been over the past, what, 20 years or so,
Or 50.
maybe more
You
than
got
that.
old.
Yeah. We've been doing what we think we can do to assist people in accomplishing their education. And we've been doing it. We have three charitable remainder trusts that at different universities. And this is almost a continuation of the similar kind of activity, only it's taken a little further because of the connection with the Japanese study center.
Black Sandy. It's not Japanese, it's the black.
I'm sorry. At the Black Center. And so, as I say, it's kind of a extension. It isn't like terribly different, but it's working, we think.
Well, this Gus Thompson and his wife, Emma, we must not, dismiss the wife here. She was a mover and a shaker. And here his family was having difficulty renting in Coronado.
My family.
And here the Black family would rent to the Chinese family. And it enabled Ron's parents to raise 4 kids, go through the Coronado schools. All of them went to college. But it was, others were not renting to Chinese at that point in 1939 in Coronado especially. And so after we got old and aren't going down, we live in Northern California and we're not going down there anymore. Two of Ron's siblings have passed, and his younger brother's also in his 80s. And so it was time to do something. And then all this about Gus Thompson and Emma, and it just seemed appropriate that why not do something for the Black community of San Diego? Gus Thompson was very active in the Black community in San Diego. And so San Diego State seemed like the closest place to
University.
the Black community there. And then it's turned out to be better than we expected, because they have this Black center, and with our charitable remainders, they'll go to scholarships and stuff. But if you've been reading about first generation going to college, often they don't do well. They drop out. It isn't a given success.
Well, they run
And-
short of money, number
Well,
one.
and knowing how, if you don't have a background and a family that's been there and knows how to, kind of help you through. And so this Black Center at San Diego State is the perfect thing. They're getting like 90% graduation through that center. And then when they said that if you gave them enough money, that they would name the center. And so we thought, oh, how perfect. We'll name it for Gus and Emma Thompson. It just seems so perfect.
Yep.
So that's kind of where we are.
No, I think that's a wonderful, and so I'm not sure if everyone has heard about the story and heard about the NPR story or read the Los Angeles Times article, but if just to point out, I think the main thing is it's not just a small little gift that your family decided to give. It is quite a contribution, especially from everything that everything costs a lot these days, but $5 million is the amount, and so I
Well,
think.
Yes, it isn't sold yet, and they throw out these numbers,
Yeah.
and let's wait till it gets sold and then see what we have.
So I think ultimately, I'd really kind of like to go through the whole story in general in terms of giving those folks who haven't actually seen the article or the report about exactly how everything transpired. And I think you did a brief review of what happened, but could you guys talk a little bit about from the very beginning in terms of, hey, like what brought you all to San Diego, and what kind of things was the family kind of experiencing? And I know this is a little hard to do because it was such a long time ago, and Ron, I know that you're obviously pretty young at that time, and it was really probably experiences that you heard from generation to generation being passed on from your parents. But do you guys have any idea of what the nature of living in San Diego was? As I understand it, your parents, Ron, were immigrants, and the only position that they could get was gardening, as I recall. Is that correct? And then Coronado obviously came into it. But if anyone's aware of San Diego in particular, there's quite a little bit of a trek that you have to make in order to get to Coronado from San Diego proper.
Well, started with his dad in Bakersfield.
Yeah, I would say that my father was probably very typical of many different Asian groups and different groups that are coming to the United States for various things, most of them for some successful work. In other words, get money to do something that they want to do. And so
But your father was born in
my
Bakersfield.
grandfather brought his family. I think there were like 5 children in the family, and his wife. When he got here, his intention was to work on the railroad. In Chinese, the California was the place where the roads are just paved with gold.
Gold Mountain.
Gold Mountain, various things. So when he came,
The grandfather.
he was too late. The work wasn't there. So he had to fall back to something. He did the easiest thing for him to do, fall back to the ground, and he worked as a tenant farmer in Bakersfield, the Central Valley area. And that's a tough situation, dependent a lot on conditions, water, and so on. And his situation was that he knew that he was going to be short on water that year, and he needed to do something, but he didn't have any English at all. And so he found someone there who was doing a similar thing as he, and got him to order some parts for his well, make it better, produce more water, and then perhaps he could succeed in what he had planned to do. Well, sprouting plants, water slow, the package comes in of all the materials he needs, and he looks it over and is going to put it together. Wrong parts. So there's nothing he can do. He's lost the game. So from there on, it's just a little bit of fogginess, because as far as the family lore goes, he knew of some Chinese people that had gone to Sacramento, and he decided, well, maybe if he goes there and talk to them, maybe they can help him somehow. And so he gets all packed up and ready to go. And then next thing we find in his story is that he didn't get to Sacramento. He got to San Diego.
Well, they both start with S, and if you don't read, that's all we hear.
So we don't know why. We know he had a lot of illness in his family, and within a year's time, pictures that we have of them that they
In Bakersfield.
took, out in Bakersfield, the family decreased by.
Well, there were 5 kids.
Yeah.
And within like a year and a half or so, there are 2, just his father and his uncle. And just this last week or so, we learned people in Bakersfield did a whole Chinese thing. And there was a quarantine of Chinatown at right around that time of yellow fever, and you couldn't get in or out. And 3 of these children died, and it probably was that yellow fever, whatever, but his father and his uncle survived. So the 2 kids made it to San Diego, and that's how his father got to San Diego.
But realize that my father was only through the 5th grade at that point. And his father, my grandfather, had a classic illness, that is, he fell into a well at one time, and he had serious illnesses there, broken this, that, and so on. So he had to put up with that. And my father couldn't go to school, even if it's available, because the family has to eat. So in the San Diego area, he scrounged as much as he could, and pre World War I, in that time, there were military bases that were there, maybe temporary, maybe not, but they're willing to help a kid out. If a kid wants to peel potatoes, they'll give him a little something. And so he worked at various things, but he wasn't very successful. fifth grade, and he had a little bit of English that he picked up in just his association, but he, as I say, he messed up on different kinds of jobs he tried. One of them that he really liked, and he thought maybe he could handle this one okay. He tried being a commercial tuna fisherman. Portuguese were working very heavily in San Diego in that time. And so 5 of them, he being one of the 5, got every penny they had, and they got an old rundown boat, and they took it into the shipyard, tore it down, do what they could do. And then they decided it's time to go out and get some fish so they could pay the bills. Well, they got down to Mexico, and unfortunately, they didn't have all the best of equipment, and one of them was cleaning out one of the fish holds, rubbing it down, and he had an auxiliary pump going, but it was gasoline, and it does not belong in a boat. So it caught fire. They lost the boat, and on and on and on. So he goes back home, and he tries different things.
Car painting.
And
Car painting.
So finally, he got involved in working in this car painting business, and one of the major Chrysler, Dodge dealers in town. The man who was his senior, he was a junior person, of course. It was a senior person, was skilled and had done quite a bit of it, but he liked it. So anyway, everything was going fine, except his nearest boss there was having trouble breathing and so on. And so he would see a doctor. Doctor says, "You've got to get out of there. Get somewhere outdoors."
Well, that guy died, and he told your dad, "You've got to get outside."
And then he didn't do it because he liked what he was doing too. So he died from my dad. Seeing what happened, went to see a doctor too, just to check himself out. And the doctor said, "Look, if you don't want to go where your partner went, then you're going to get outdoors and do some work, do some physical work." So he ended up looking at the idea of doing outdoor gardening of some sort. In San Diego, it's not too far across the bay to Coronado. So there are a lot of rich people over there, and they have a lot of grass cut and so on. So he went over and he started working over there, and tough, but he did it. Only trouble is he could work till dark, and I'm sure he didn't have the best equipment. But then when he wanted to go home, he had rented a house in San Diego, and he would come home, eat, sleep, early morning, go back to Coronado, work, and so on.
On the ferry.
So we figured that he could do better. He'd have more time, for one thing, if he could rent in Coronado. So he started checking around, and by this time I was 1 to 2 years old, and
Ron's the eldest. He's the first of them.
I'm the first, and so he starts looking around for a place to rent in Coronado, and he took my mother too, but but hers is another story I won't get into.
Well, that she was
she
raised in China and she had quite an accent and
yes,
she sounded very Chinese.
and she didn't have any English really. So he wanted her to see what he was looking at as far as rentals. And so he kept going around with her and looking, checking, and no, there's nothing available for Chinese. Then finally, somehow, he gets hooked up with Gus Thompson, who black, and Gus says, yeah, well, yeah, he has a place to rent, and his sons have just gotten into college, and they're going away to school, and he has just finished building a house in San Diego, and what it is he comes from a time when slavery was still all over the country. And so he was the favorite man of
Babcock
Bab-
built
Mr.
the Hotel
Babcock.
Del.
And Mr. Babcock says, well, people were talking about doing something in Coronado because it was kind of a new place, hadn't opened up, nothing was going on. And Babcock thought, you know, that's a neat place. Build a big hotel, biggest hotel with the nicest of everything, and people will come from everywhere and go there. And you can pay for it by taking this remaining land, dividing it up into small blocks, selling that, and that would help pay for everything. So my dad did rent the place, but very nicely, I don't know who suggested it, him or the owner of the property, but he got a rental arrangement with an option to buy. So that if he wanted to buy it, he could apply his rent to his price of it, which happened later.
Gus died and Emma honored that.
Yeah.
And so in the
And it was
50s,
about
they became the owner of the property.
57 before he did anything. And he was very cautious about everything. He didn't want to show any success or anything. So I always wondered when I was growing up, and I'd work with him sometimes on anywhere, and we'd work. He would work normally 6 days a week, and then on Sundays we'd get extra work. And we do all these trimming things and on and on and on. So anyway, as it turns out, lost myself now.
Well,
He
when Gus Thompson died, Emma Thompson honored
honored
the
that.
buying,
she
and
had.
so his
So-
family bought the property,
Yeah.
and that's what they have now. And in the meantime, his dad had torn down the livery stable, which is what was there, and built an apartment building. So now there's an apartment building and the house, and yet we're way too old to be going down there anymore. So it's time to do something, and it just seemed right that full
But-
circle, you
Yeah.
know, we are where we are.
Gus had actually had no education at all. He could not read or write,
But Emma
but he was
could.
a very smart man. He very quickly realized that the streets are kind of dusty and dirty as out country, you know, kind of but flat. And so he could spread water or something and keep the dust down. And he could pick up trash, run it out of town to a remote area, burn it, and get rid of it that way. So he had these little jobs that he did. And so he was pretty sharp. And he built a place to keep his horses and his buggies and all of that. And that worked out fine for him.
Well, in those days, the rich folks that went to the Hotel Del would arrive with their black horses and buggies and black footmen, whatever you call them. And so they had to have a place to stay. And so this livery stable next to the house was where they would all stay. And that was there until finally his dad got the property, and then they tore down that livery stable and built the apartment building. But Ron remembers that, you know, growing up, that livery stable was where the black chauffeurs would come to stay.
We were getting calls from people in the East Coast, from Chicago, so on. There are groups of people who were wealthy enough in those days so that they would have like 4 or maybe 5 houses, completely furnished, Cadillac, a yacht.
That was
in
later after the
Coronado.
horses. The Cadillacs came after the horses.
But anyway, getting all those things, and we would get a call, and they'd want to know if there was room for their chauffeur. They would be coming on such and such a day. So it got to the point where we were getting reservations for the chauffeurs to stay, the black chauffeurs. So
Anyway, that's kind of the background.
yeah,
No, that's a fascinating story. So I didn't realize that. So your grandfather actually came over from China. Is that correct? And it was right after the gold rush. So that would have been in the 1850s, 1860s, around that time period.
Something in there, yeah. We're working on it.
I'd love to hear an update on that, because there's so much intricacy with the history, right? In terms of where where all of our families have come from. And unfortunately, they didn't have the internet back then, so we can't just search, things up. But
Ask them,
yeah.
And I was thinking about this thing with the Japanese Association today. And I'm thinking, how many of you or your ancestors also were gardeners? That was a big thing, especially for the Japanese, because you could do bonsai and all that fancy stuff, but it's everybody start. In fact, today we have a lady gardener, and she's one of he was a high school teacher, one of his former students, but her father was a Japanese gardener, and she has picked up his gardening after he passed. And we have the Japanese gardener who is former student.
well, before we move further along, I've been monitoring the chat, and I know that Jan and Sets Iwashita wanted to say hello to you guys. And so just reading that, we talked a little bit about the history and what year your grandfather came over here. You mentioned that your dad was stuck in Bakersfield, but transitioned eventually over to San Diego maybe in the 5th grade, was in the San Diego area. Does that sound right?
Yeah, the pictures that we have that are from Bakersfield, he would have been 10 to 12-ish in there. So yeah, that would be about right.
And I know that, Ron, you mentioned that when the Thompsons gave their generosity to your father, you're probably about 1 or 2 years old. Given the fact that you're 85, that was probably around 1940. Is that correct?
39.
1939. Okay.
He was 2.
And how old was your dad at that time in 1939 era?
Yeah. Well, he was born in 05. You do the math.
Oh, okay. I can do that. So about 34 years old, right? So that's pretty amazing just looking at the story and how there there's so much hardship that your dad had to endure, family separated, other things beyond control, medical issues coming down. And it was interesting hearing about, the military bases and peeling potatoes and whatnot and getting scraps from the military bases because San Diego is a pretty big military town for those who aren't aware. Certainly when I was visiting San Diego, I never realized the strong connection to the military. And it's, May is not only Asian American and Pacific Islander Native Hawaiian month, but it's also Military Appreciation Month. So it's kind of interesting to hear all of these stories.
This was we graduated in 59 from the University of Redlands. And those of you who are young, you won't know all these things, but I went back to East Coast grad school in Boston, and he went
Harvard.
to Navy OCS in Newport, Rhode Island. So we're both back there. And so we keep seeing each other still.
I still
and-
had a draft.
And then
during that
Christmas
time.
vacation is coming, and I get 2 weeks, and he has 2 weeks. And we wanted to go to New York City. I mean, we're Californians, what do we know? And so, but in 1959, you couldn't go unless you were married. So we had to get married and then go to
Socially
2 weeks in New York City. And then the Navy didn't know what the hell to do with us. They had no idea, this mixed couple, good God.
Well, I followed the rules as much as I could. And one of the things they told us right off front is if you're going to do something that's a little different, talk to your commanding officer and tell them about it. So I did. We were going to get married on December 19th. And in Boston, December 19th is kind of cool.
It snowed.
Very cold. So snow. So I said, well, that's okay because they issue all these uniforms to us. And when you get to a certain point and they figure you're going to stay in the service and not get bilged out, then you can get maybe a few more privileges. I don't know. So I went to my commanding officer and I told him that I was going to get married at Christmas break. And he said, oh, that's nice. And I said, we think so. We've neither of us done that. In fact, neither of us, well, anyway, but we'll go with that. And so he said, may I know the young lady's name? And he said, I said, yes, sir. Janice Brown. And he says, Brown, Janice Brown. Why don't you wait until you get to your first duty station before you get married? You'll be more settled down, so on. No, sir. He said, then, no, I will not let you wear the heavier winter outfit.
Yeah, you wouldn't let him wear the winter
That's what I
coat.
wanted to do. I wanted to wear a warmer uniform because all I had was a summer suit from California.
No,
and-
he wouldn't.
And so that's when I got married. And I didn't want to break any rules. His response to my saying that I wanted to use
But
that
the
suit,
good thing was,
he said, what's wrong with the sailor suit?
yeah,
You
well,
know, and I said,
Anyway.
nothing, sir, but the other one is heavier, and it's something that I think that we would all appreciate a lot more. And
but in
no.
1959, they had not a clue what to do with us. So guess what? They sent us to Hawaii. So we had 3 years of suffering through Hawaii.
Yeah.
Suffer, suffer, suffer.
So,
So it all worked out great, but that was the times.
Yeah.
And I keep saying, look at the price 64 years later. Look at the price you paid for 2 weeks in New York City.
So did I hear that correctly? You guys both wanted to go to New York, and the only way to go to New York is to get married, and that's what the impetus was?
Not in 1959. No, that would
Oh,
be.
okay.
I tell people today, I said, we had to get married, and they go, huh? What? I mean, you just go and live with people today, but not in 1959. Yeah, so we did. And both of our families, they adjusted really well. Everything worked out fine. And so all was good. Yeah, it's been good.
Yeah. Although it was still not legal at that time for us to marry.
Well, it was in
some
Boston,
states.
but in some states it would not have been legal. Yeah. But I mean, what did we know, you know? In fact, when I went in, because he was in, you know, Newport, and he couldn't come up, and I'm at the Boston registrar of whatever, and I go in to get this marriage license, and I said, you know, and whatever, and it's 1959, and they asked me, is he yellow, black, or whatever? And I burst into tears. I'm just sobbing in this office, you know, but I was so shocked. But that was 1959, you know, yellow, black, I don't know, green, I don't know what. But anyway, it all worked. We're still together, so. Somebody says, Wikipedia says 1960, that interracial, and then I didn't get the rest of it. So somebody's added something there. Was probably.
Yeah. I think interracial marriage was still illegal in 31 states in 1960.
States. Oh my gosh. Oh, we're rule breakers.
Yep.
Well, there's another comment here about allyship, and I think thanks to Judy Lee for her comment. She writes that it benefits our communities. It's to be recognized, documented, appreciated, and rewarded whenever possible, especially when they seem unexpected or not likely. So she wanted to thank you for sharing your stories, and kudos to you for your recognition of the Thompson family. And Jen, you mentioned this a little earlier, but you know, and Ron, you did as well. But the Thompsons were really, you know, awesome individuals, an awesome family. From the Los Angeles Times article, it basically stated that Gus Thompson was actually born into slavery in Kentucky in 1859, before the Civil War broke out. And he actually moved into Coronado in his 20s. And as you mentioned, it wasn't just Gus Thompson, but Emma as well. They are both leaders of the San Diego community, and great leadership specifically for the Black middle class. Emma was leader of the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church, which was the first Black church in San Diego, and was also a huge advocate for anti-lynching bills that were sent over to Senate. So I think, you know, the Thompson family, and I think in the future, I think that's something that we'll focus on as well in terms of hearing their story. But they absolutely were great beacons of equality, freedom, hope in San Diego, way before the time when it was, you know, fashionable to do so. So I think, you know, hearing about your story and then hearing your connection with the Thompson family, I think is very powerful.
An irreverent take on what he did by renting to the Chinese. How do I do this nicely and don't offend anybody? He couldn't have rented to Blacks in Coronado at that time. But a way of saying up yours is to rent to the Chinese. So I can't do one, but I will show you what I can do. And I like that. I'm not sure that was the motivation, but I like that take on it.
I had a quick question. I wonder, or a thought, I wonder if, you know, we were talking about the Black chauffeurs living in the delivery. Was it illegal for them to stay in the hotel, Del?
Oh, they were not allowed to stay in the hotel.
But the hotel would
they
It was
had,
for employees of the hotel.
they would actually make the call sometimes, and sometimes it'd be the people who wanted the reservations, if you will. But they could not. I guess probably typically it would be something like you can't have them sleeping in their workers in the hotel after they got things pretty well made, built on that hotel. It was, when it was built, it was the world's biggest wooden building, and the number of rooms I don't know, but they had a lot of maintenance that had to be done. So what they did is they put a building up that was not fancy, but it was just rooming house for their workers, particularly Black.
No, thanks for elaborating on the history, obviously, of Coronado. And, in the Los Angeles Times article, I think your brother was quoted about some of his memories growing up in Coronado about not being invited to birthday parties because he wasn't white. And, do you have any of those memories or thoughts or recollections?
The cotillions, the cotillions that you and the Jewish student were not invited to. Yeah.
The Navy had its own social system, and they're outside the school, so they could do things that they wanted to do, and the school couldn't say anything to them. So they had their, I don't know what they called it, springs, whatever, a big do. And they always go to the officers club facility and have some really nice parties there and so on. And the people that went there were generally speaking the leaders in the school system.
White.
But all but one Jewish boy, me,
Bobby?
and a Japanese boy
Bobby Washington.
who just come back within a few years, just come back from the camps. And I think that was about it. And the teachers were aware of what was happening, and they would call me over after class. They said, "You drop by and I want to talk to you." And there was not a chance that I'm going to date some admiral's daughter.
Although he did have a white girlfriend in high school.
It's not going to happen. So, yeah.
He talks about his father with the gardening truck and how embarrassing that this old beat up gardening truck, and he was embarrassed if his father would get it near the school, and he would ask him to drop him off, a couple of blocks away.
Well, that's
so that,
if it were raining or something like that, he would offer us a ride to school rather than get wet. So we say, sure, but why don't you just drop us over here, this little side corner where nobody can see us. So.
Hi, this is Jan and Setsi Washta. Sets wants to say hi to everybody.
Hello. This is 83-year-old guy from Coronado. And I want to say hi to the Dongs. Ronald was a friend of my brother Bobby.
Oh, Bobby, your
Yeah.
brother.
Yes.
Oh.
And Ronald Lloyd Dong Jr. was a friend of my younger brother, Yuki.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was in same class. I was in same class as your sister, Jackie. Jackie.
Jackie's class. Oh, wow.
So hello to everybody. And Linda was our neighbor in Poston. And we got lots of stories about Coronado, but not today though. But I want to say hello to the Dongs because it's been a long, long time.
For everyone, if you don't know, Poston is the incarceration camp that Linda, you were born there, right? During World War II.
I was born there, and Setz's family shared the barrack with our family.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is really what the monthly dialogues are for, right? In terms of bringing people together. And it's really wonderful to see the connections coming together again. And I think it all stems really from this wonderful gesture. But in terms of the Thompsons, looking at the article, it sounds like when you were going through life and whatnot, obviously you don't live in San Diego anymore, and it sounds like the Thompsons are in the Colorado area. How did you guys, keep in touch, not keep in touch? What did you guys come together after the reporter came at you with more information for the story?
There's been no contact with them. However, the San Diego State would like to have a ribbon cutting ceremony. Of course, it'd be nice if we'd sell the place first, that would be helpful. But it would be interesting because then the relatives might come and then we would have a chance to meet them. That would be really nice. One of them, I guess, lives up near us here, but we haven't ever met or had any communication with them.
I might just add that the way we are gifting this to San Diego State University is it's in 3 parts because of the 2 deaths in the partnership that owned it at this point in time. And Janice and I were fortunate enough to have come up to what is now called Silicon Valley area. And when we came up here, we didn't come up for any reason like that. But
when we came here, they didn't know computers.
so someone asked me if I was a computer programmer, and I said, "Program? What's that?" So anyway.
But the 3 parts, since there were 4 siblings, and the 2 sisters have passed, but one sister has 2 sons. We call them the boys, and they're almost 60, but the boys. Yeah. And so they're 1/3. Ron is 1/3, and then the brother Lloyd and his wife are 1/3. Yeah. So our third is just going to go outright. And then Lloyd's is going to be a charitable remainder that will work until his wife, she's younger, will pass. And then the boys get their money up front because they have college.
They're going to college now, or will
so
be.
It's all going to, kind of fit to,
So
hopefully the city of Coronado doesn't decide it's historical and won't let us sell. That could be one of the issues, but well, we are hoping that won't happen.
We probably are making it difficult for ourselves, but we want to sell all the properties all in one piece, and we don't
the apartments
as
and
is
the house.
as is, because if we were to take the house that was built way back when
by Gus
and bring it all up to code, we'd be working on it for years. So
cross your fingers.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question? It's I think you asked what is so fascinating about this, and the day in the day that we live, when somebody does something like this, I would assume that you gift a lot of money. I've never done this, but if you gift $5 million, you'd want your name. You would want, Dong to be on the center's name. But how did you guys come up with, let's put Gus and Emma Thompson's name on it instead of ours?
Well, because it just seemed right. I mean, they're kind of the impetus of how the Dongs were in Coronado. So it just seemed perfect.
We would not have been there.
Yeah.
We would not have had the life we have had.
Yeah.
And
Without
quite
them.
frankly, there isn't a place in the world that we need to go to now. We've been everywhere.
Yeah, we've traveled a lot. So we got old. But yeah, I mean, it just seemed, I mean, the Dongs, what the hell? But, to have Gus and Emma, it just seemed so right. I don't know the Japanese community. I know more about the Chinese community. I'm learning. And this is kind of rattling cages a little bit in the Chinese community because you keep things within your family, so you would not do this. As his brother said at one point, I think my dad would be rolling over in his grave or something, at this point. But it's out of character for Chinese to do that. And I've wondered if that also is one of the reasons that this kind of is getting the notoriety that it is, because it's out of character for Chinese. But I don't know if that's true across other Asian ethnicities or not. I don't know. But that is one of the issues. Ron's brother's wife is from Hong Kong, and she reads and speaks Chinese, and she can read Chinese papers. And apparently there's some, kind of, what is this? This is, not the norm.
But she's come around.
Oh, she's great, but the scuttlebutt in the Chinese paper isn't so laudatory.
Got it. I would assume, and I don't know, for me, it's not about race, but even if there were another Black family that this happened to, the circumstances would be different. But to name it after another family, even if it's in the same race, is just interesting for me. I don't think that happens very often, I would assume.
Yeah. I don't think it ever even dawned on us to do it any name. In fact, the very fact that they said if we gave them a lot of money, they would give us naming rights. From that point on, it was how do we get enough money so we can get naming rights? And it was always to be Gus and Emma. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
To be anything else.
And Ron, I wanted to ask a quick question about you were teachers in the San Jose district in terms of growing up. Like, what did you teach, and what grade level did you teach? And I have a feeling that a lot of the generosity that we're seeing today is obviously due to that background to some extent, correct?
Well, the interest in education, yeah. Ron was science and math at high school. His background was earth science, so he taught science and math at high school. And I was a special ed teacher in middle school. So I taught all the kids that failed and were having a horrible time in school and behavior problems and all of that. And I loved every minute of it.
Can I but this is such a I use that word a lot, but it's a wonderful story, and part of this for me is just the fact that you guys got married pre-1960. Like what was the thought process there? Did you guys ever have reservations, or was it just natural?
No, it's just we needed to get to New York City. We had 2 weeks. I mean, we had plays to go see and things to do. In fact, we hitched a ride with a Harvard law student. He gave us, because he was going home, and so he gave us this ride, And on the way, we had just gotten married that morning. And we get this free ride to New York City. And on the way, he said, I just took this class in annulments. I can already annul your marriage. Oh, wait, we haven't been married an hour yet. And he's going to annul this thing. In fact, when I was dating Ron, my father is from the Gilroy area. He was an engineer, Douglas Aircraft and all this kind of stuff. But he was from rural Gilroy, and he's also a 1905 birth date. And I went down to go water skiing at Ron's in Coronado one time. And then I asked my dad to pick me up at the bus station. And on the way back, he said, I just want you to know that I can never accept a Chinese as a son-in-law. And that's the weirdest thing. I mean, I'm just going water skiing. Where's this coming from? And so the next thing we know, we're getting married in New York City. And he wrote and said, if I can get now this is early, flights. If I can get a flight, I will come. He didn't, but that's all right. They made 3 trips to Hawaii. He loved Hawaii. And the last 4 years of his life, he lived with us here in San Jose. And there was never, people can change. He was a product of what he was a product of. And he changed, and his parents, the same thing. I'm sure they didn't want me as a daughter-in-law, but they were wonderful. And they, in fact, at one of the funerals of, I guess, his mom, one of the ladies came up and said, I just want you to know that she always thought you were a really good daughter-in-law. So people change, and, we all got along and everything worked really well.
We had something related I did in high school. I was dating a girl there, and
Susan.
The probability makes it white. It was a white girl. And I dated her for probably a couple of years. And her father was an importer. He went to Southeast Asia mainly and would import items and different things. And I don't know whether he sold them or whatever. Then he making these trips back and forth, and always professed to be very open. They had actually a couple of guys.
Indonesian kids that stayed with them. Yeah.
From where?
Indonesia.
Indonesia was, yes.
Yeah.
And they were going to grad schools in San Diego. It may have been San Diego State for all I know. I can't remember now. But anyway, he was always polite, nice, so on and so forth. He did drink a little bit. Anyway, after
he came over and talked to your dad.
Just about my graduating year, he came by, and he normally doesn't come by to see my dad. So, but that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to talk to my dad. And I kind of figured out what was going on. So I made myself scarce, and he and my dad went on the patio, and they talked for quite a while. And he left, and then I talked to my dad, said, well, what was going on? And he said, it's probably what you think. He wanted me to break it up. And I told him, this is my dad speaking, he said, I told him that it wasn't my business. It was mine, Ron's business, and Susan was the girl's name. So anyway, that kind of washed out slowly, and it didn't go anywhere. But the fact is that he played one social type of a person, and in reality, he was somebody else. And just by chance, his drinking got in his way, and family threw him out. And
But he did come to your college graduation.
And so when my graduation from college came around, we were out in the quad after the ceremony and so on with my family, several different members of the family and so on. We looked over kind of in the bushes a little bit, and here he is over there. There's G-Mac over there.
You know, who knows? You know, life is weird.
He had to
People are
have
weird.
felt a little bit bad about his own actions, I guess. That's all I can figure out.
Well, I think he liked you, but, you know. Anyway, we're taking too much of your time.
No, not at all. I think this is really the quintessence of what we're trying to accomplish here. And I really, really appreciate your dedication, your time to share with us and really to teach us about how life really should be in terms of looking beyond just what's on the cover, realizing that love is love, realizing to be appreciative for others, and also bringing about so many other connections. I know thank you to the Iwashitas for also kind of speaking out. I would really like to touch base with you so we could talk with you about your experiences in Coronado in the future. But I think this is really what this is all about, what we're here on this planet for, not to, get as much money as we can, not to push other people away, but to really share and embrace our differences and have different understandings coming together. And I think your story is really beautiful, as multiple people have already said. So really, really appreciate your time, especially for an organization, you've never met me in person, and you're kind enough to answer the phone and give me time. So I can't say enough that it's really our pleasure and our honor to be able to have you here today. And really, if you do have a chance to come to San Diego, please reach out, because I would love to meet you in person and show you my gratitude in person. So
This has been very interesting. I've enjoyed this.
Appreciate your
Yeah.
questions as
Yeah.
well.